Welcome to Management of Organizations in Europe. This is lecture 5 and the topic of today is leadership and decision making. You can read more about this in chapter 9 of Business Essentials. It's about 20 pages. And we're going to cover in this brief lecture the following learning objectives. So first of all, we're going to look at what is leadership and what are the differences with management. Can a leader be a manager? Can a manager be a leader? Also, we're going to summarize early approaches to study of leadership, discuss the concept of situational approaches to leadership, describe some transformational and charismatic perspectives on leadership, identify and discuss leadership substitutes and neutralizers. We're also going to look into leaders as coaching, gender, ethics, and cross-cultural issues in leadership, as well as virtual leadership and strategic leadership. These new issues in leadership we're going to discuss really brief. In the end, we're going to spend a bit more time on leadership and decision making and how the behavioral perspectives on decision making influence. But first, what is leadership? So, where management is a planned skill that can be taught, leadership is more a trait. As it's a trait, it can't be trained, it is already present. Of course, you can train it to become more obvious. So, leadership is the process and behavior used by someone, such as a manager, to motivate, inspire, influence the behavior of others. So, management is actually just a role. So, management is the process of planning, organizing, and controlling an organization's resources to achieve its goal. I just said management is a role, so leadership needs power, which actually means you have the ability to affect the behavior of others. And if it's connected to the organizational hierarchy, we call it the legitimate power. Management, of course, has the legitimate power, but will people listen? So, is this the same? Of course, the answer is really obvious. No, it's not the same. A person can be a manager, a leader, both, or neither. So, we're going to zoom into the trait of leadership, where you have the power to influence, and let's look at the different approaches we have to leadership. Today, I'm going to discuss 3 approaches to leadership, and the first one is the trait approach. It's focused in identifying essential leadership traits, or these are personal characteristics you might have or not have. So recent research has focused on a limited set of traits. So it's about emotional intelligence, EQ, your intelligence, IQ, integrity, and your knowledge of the business. This set will actually lead to people will listen to you, yes or no. We also have the behavioral approach. So this is more focused on the behavior of effective leaders or ineffective leaders. So it's assumed that the behavior of effective leaders would be the same across all situations. So that means that if you're a leader in one area of expertise, you will be a leader everywhere. If we look at that, we have 2 types. We have task focused, so that relates to the increased performance of employee. So as a leader, you try to influence the behavior of the people working for you to work better. We also have employee focused, so that's less about the output. This is about the increase in job satisfaction, motivation, and the well-being of employees. And if people are more happy, hence they will have better output. So different ways. One is process-oriented, the other one is person-oriented. The third approach to leadership is situational approach. This assumes that the appropriate leader knows how to behave in one situation or another, which means that the leader can change his or her behavior. So you actually see that the leadership continuum is cross-lined. So depending on how your subordinates are, you make certain choices. So you have boss-centered leadership versus subordinate-centered leadership. Depending on how the people, the process, and the organization are, you change your behavior. You can imagine that if you have a lot of highly schooled professional workers, they would like to have more freedom, whereas you are in a factory where people have to do automated tasks and there's no room to deviate. Boss-centered leadership will work better because personal freedom will interfere with the process. So here leadership and management becomes really close to each other, but of course you don't have to be a manager to be a leader. So 3 types of leadership. Transformational leadership. So this is a set of abilities that allows a leader to recognize the need for change, create a vision to guide the change, and execute the change effectively. So transformational leadership are the visionaries, the leaders who see that the current set is not the solution and they want to go somewhere else. Example of the past is Steve Jobs from Apple. More recent, Elon Musk. They create something new. They recognize a need for change before the user or the consumer knows they want change. They have a vision and they can do it. The next type of leadership is transactional leadership. This is more for leading during a period of stability, where the 2 examples I gave before, they will continue to transform. But after you have the transformational part, it's quite clear that you might want to have transactional leadership. So these are leaders who can keep the boat going, but they will not change. So during a time of stability, these are excellent leaders. We also have charismatic leadership, which is more influence based on the personal charisma. So people do not really support an organization or an idea or a project. No, they support the person. We see this also a lot in politics, where certain political parties can grow really, really fast based on their leader, not so much on actually how they perform. So 3 types of leadership. They're all different. Not a transformational leader is not always a transactional leader or a charismatic leader. It's just that you need to be able to identify the right type of leader for the right type of situation. And maybe if you are a leader, which not all of us are, it's good to know which one you are, because you want to be in the situation where you can thrive. Then, as some special issues in leadership. So there are alternatives to leadership, actually substitutes making leadership unnecessary or irrelevant. So let's have a look at it. So individual knowledge, motivation, and experience can actually be a substitute for leadership. Not everyone needs a leader. A lot of us know what to do. We can motivate ourselves and we know what to do. Also, job factors can be neutralized. Sometimes people can be replaced by automation, or in highly controlled environments. You don't need leadership because people know what to do. There are also other organizational factors that could neutralize leadership. If you have a clear goal and a clear mission, clear procedures and clear processes, you don't need a leader. People know what to do. So we have individual factors which substitute, but also organizational factors that might neutralize and they render the leader behavior to become ineffective. Also group factors, high group performance norm or high group cohesion do influence if we need a leader, yes or no. Then in the 21st century we have some special items for leadership. So strategic leadership. So a strategic leader has the ability to understand the complexity of both the organization and the environment. So they can oversee everything at a strategic level. Not all strategic levels know what to do on an operational level. Also, ethical leadership. We assume that all leaders are ethical, which is of course not the case. So in some cases you want behavior that reflects high ethical standards. So not that you only behave ethical, it's also visible. Virtual leadership, very relevant now in the corona pandemic. We have the COVID-19. This is leadership in digital teams. This is totally different than a face-to-face relationship, as we see each other less and in different forms. We also know the leader as coach. So this is where the leader actually helps the staff thrive and is not the manager type who oversees all. So the leader's role is to make sure that all the others exceed expectations instead of being the visual person in the front who leads the pack. We also have a lot of things about gender currently. So you might ask, is there a difference between leaders and their gender? Does it influence? Researchers show both. Some of these researches are again outdated. This is where you have to form your own opinion. However, one thing is, it is very relevant as it does influence. We also have cross-cultural leadership, and that's leadership which is diversity-based. Again, culture is very broad in this context. So it could also be a different type of personality, it can be a different nationality, it can be a lot. Also a pool in a big organization, pool of very different leaders can help so that you can rotate the different leadership traits to the part of the organization that needs a certain leader at a certain moment in time. So before it was said, you can be a leader and you can be in every organization. Of course, every culture reflects different on a certain leader, and if teams become more intercultural, leadership has to change to that direction as well. So just like managers, also leaders have to make decisions. So they can be very directive, where they say, I make the decision based on my ideas, very hierarchical, they are the leaders and they do not want to discuss. It can also be a bit more democratic, so consultative. I make the decision based on our ideas. Or you flip it and you delegate more, where you say you make the decision based on our ideas. So there's a high level of trust where you actually say, you know what we want. And we have consensual, where we make the decisions on our ideas all together. So what's important to know is that decision making is choosing one alternative from among several options. So the process in the decision making is recognizing and defining the nature of the situation, identifying the alternative, choosing the best alternative and put it into practice. So there are 4 forms for this. If you will Google, you'll see that there are many more. What's also very important when you're making decisions and you're defining the nature are the conditions that they're out. What will happen if I make one choice? What are the alternatives? What are the effects of the alternatives? Is it a programmed decision or non-programmed? A programmed decision will reoccur a lot, so you could maybe easily delegate it as it's before. We also have non-programmed decisions that are relatively unstructured, and it occurs with low frequency. What are the exact alternatives, and what are the risks of each alternative, and the payoffs, the cost, the state of certainty of the outcome. So how sure am I that the decision I make will lead to the outcome? And one is also important, are the stakeholders. So can I form a coalition with others? How do my suppliers think about this? How will my workers think about it? Will it change their opinion about me? So the stakeholders are really key, and you also see that there are lobbyists trying to influence you or your team in decision making. All in all, decision making is very hard and unclear, and you need to find a system about this. So you discussed decision making before from a manager perspective, and you see that in a leadership decision making process there are much more uncertain effects present. So today we discussed the difference between management and leadership. We looked into the different leadership traits, the neutralizers, some special items, and now the decision-making process you can have, which you're in as a leader. Next week we'll discuss chapter 10 of Business Essential, the last chapter of this series, which is about, I will check for you, human resource management and labor relations.